Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I wanted to talk to you about a story, a fictional story about a child in a rich family with antisocial narcissism throughout the family and what it can lead to. So let's jump in. This is for entertainment purposes only. The story begins with a child that was born to a man and a woman that were not married. The man was married, but the woman was not. So the child was born out of wedlock. And the mother was a starseed. And the father was rich or had a lot of money, and he had a name that he had to keep clean. The mother of the child decided to keep the baby, and it went against what the father wanted to happen. So the father set up for the mother to be taken out, unalived, in a car accident. It was set up to where it was going to be somebody who was somewhat under an influence of some sort of substance. So as the mother was driving with the child in the car, the idea was to take them both out, and that would clear this man who was married and had finances and had clout. He was like a famous man. He would be able to keep his name clear and not have to pay child support. His spouse wouldn't know about it. But what happened was the mother was a starseed earth angel type, and her and the child got into the wreck, except just the mother died. Just the mother passed, and the child was fine. They made a new birth certificate with a different name and adopted out this child, or switched him at birth. And then fast forward to this child, and this child was left with a inheritance. It was a generational inheritor as a young child. So an aunt and uncle had adopted this child and was able to get finances and homes because of the inheritance that gave them the ability to care for the child. But as the child got older, it was something that was going to end, so they didn't have to work. They just lived at large. And as the child got older, they were being siphoned from like a generator. You know how we talk about with narcissism, they are used as energy and to manifest for other people. So they held this child down, and they put witchcraft on them and spells on them, on this child, for years and years, their whole life. They were mistreated and abused, and this child was coming of age, so things had to change in the way of you don't have to care for the child anymore after they get to a certain age. So what they did then was another family had come across this trust case that came rolling through their office, and they were part of a coven, a crime family that works with different organizations and churches, false churches and false priests. And this case came across a desk of somebody who looks for these types of things, a corrupt individual that works with the family. And the family has a lot of police and FBI and a lot of people in their pocket. And they have made a lot of money from taking out contracts on starseeds, generational curse breakers, earth angels. And they would date them, unalive them, and have payment for doing these sorts of things, because covens and witchcraft and the powers that be want these people to not raise the vibration of the earth. They want to keep it at such a low level, in a fear state. So they get contracts on these individuals, and then they get life insurance policies. So they get paid when they take the contract, and then when they're gone, they will get a life insurance policy cashed in as well. And that's how this family became rich. This family had a son, and the son got with a female as they got older, and they started their own coven, church, mosque type thing. It was basically a cult. And that family member that worked on the inheritance trust cases had like a sister that was a teller at the bank that they worked at. So you had an inheritance man, officer, and then his sister, the teller. So they called this individual and let them know about this trust case that was going to go to this child that had grown. It was about to be revealed to them. There was also a lawyer involved, but the lawyer was a just individual. So the family took a contract out from this coven or from organization through the government, through the FBI, through the judicial system. And they have these programs such as MK Ultra, which came out of World War II and the crazy mad scientists. And it meant mind control. The K is how you spell control in German. In 1945, they had Project Paperclip, which took 2,000 scientists from the German army over to the United States and gave them asylum, 2,000 families. And they were high-ranking German officers. They were scientists and physicists, astrophysicists. Walter von Braun was the head of our space program, and he was one that made the V1 and V2 rockets that had taken out a lot of Europe. And he was the head of our space program. He was one of the ones that was given asylum. You'll hear about Plum Island, which is some mad scientist island off the coast of New York. And that's where they did some weird malformations and creations. Some say Lyme disease came from that island. They mixed some infection with a tick, and it's named from Lyme, Connecticut, because they came off the island. You know, there's always a breeze from an island off the coast of an ocean, and they got blown over there, and that's where predominantly you'll find Lyme disease. Lyme, Connecticut, I think. And there was 2,000 of them, just to give you an idea. They also started putting fluoride in the water in 1945 because it's partly fluoxetine, which is one of the ingredients in Prozac, which is the leftover fertilizer. It kind of numbs you, brings your IQ down, and makes you comfortable in the situations that you shouldn't be comfortable in, so the governments can exploit, and you'll be comfortable with some of it. You'll accept more. I do believe the CIA was also created in 1945, and I would say they were all orchestrated out of the same Project Paperclip. But nevertheless, to get back to this story, they also started this MK Ultra program where they would control people, and a lot of these people related to either a victim or somebody in a coven or something may get used. This is where you also get the Manchurian candidates. But they found about this case, and this was all hidden to this child who is now a grown adult. So because the individual was getting of age, they had to do something else. So what happened was the man and the woman from this coven found out about the aunt and the uncle. Or they switched it from the aunt and the uncle that was falsely taking care of this individual to now getting a healthcare power of attorney over this child that was now a grown adult. And they had an MD and a lawyer sign off on these papers falsely for a bribe, for extortion. And they had them put in the care of this individual, but first they married them. They falsely married them. So the woman of this coven that was in a relationship with this man, they did a false marriage, and they found out about this with this individual, and they got false marriage paperwork so they could start to take control over this inheritance. And so this rich aunt and uncle, actually the coven really got rich from the inheritance and these contracts. The family, the main family, the parents. But as the child got older, these two decided to marry falsely this individual through a lawyer. And then They got false paperwork by extorting and bribing an MD to sign off paperwork saying this child, or this grown adult now, who was about to accept or get granted this inheritance case, finally, this inheritance money. They then got a healthcare power of attorney using a lawyer and an MD falsely. They changed the medical records. They were able to put in there this individual was unsafe, and they would put out propaganda to defame them, saying that they were uncontrollable, they were promiscuous, and they had a lot of substance abuse issues. So this now became a wife taking care of her husband, but she also kind of had this man in the background. They had agreed to some sort of relationship just to siphon this inheritance and look like a family, but they really weren't really together, because it was what you'll find kind of like a sociopath and a psychopath. The only difference you find in the two is one doesn't get anxious and one does. One may have to deal with a little conscience, but very little. So they'll do anything and they don't think twice about it. So what this individual did is they set up with a group of 3 to take a contract out on this individual through the Coven to take this person out. And this group of 3 did incantations, and they got rooted to the enemy. And they're all rooted to each other, so that the power of 3 would be able to take this individual out. And they wanted to destiny swap because this person had a lot of fruit and they were very abundant. That's what they noticed. This female that was now married to them, unbeknownst to them, came to meet with them for the first time and started to date this individual. So they dated this individual, and then this individual, after several cycles and switching, they were trying to destiny swap. So she would take the energy from this man, and she was supposed to be the hit woman, the one that would take the hit out on this individual. But she kind of started to have feelings for this individual, and she couldn't do it. So that became a problem. And so she cycled with him for several years, and then what she would do is take the energy off of this individual as they switch energy and project, and then they would go home. When they would have intercourse with their connected partner, and they're all rooted together, they would then be able to take some of that energy. So all 3 of them were able to have intercourse and copycat off this person's energy, this fuel. And they became very abundant. They started a lot of false businesses, and they were laundering money through false businesses, and they had started trafficking organizations in the city. And it was undercover, but they had a lot of people in their pocket. They had a coroner, they had an MD, they had the inheritance officer, they had the teller at the bank that was a sister to the inheritance officer. Then they also had a lawyer, a judge, two police officers, and 2 FBI officers. One that directed the mail and was able to get with the mail officer, and they had a person in CPS. They had a coroner, and this person started dating this individual, and then this individual had enough of the abuse, so they blocked them, they cut everything off with them. They realized they were dealing with narcissism, so they started to study this and started a channel for healing. YouTube channel, TikTok channel. And all that time, they were living off of this fuel. They started all these different businesses, and they were able to divert the mail through the mail officer and the FBI official from this person's house to their house and any of these things, but they couldn't get into the inheritance just because they were married to the individual falsely. So they had to set up a healthcare power of attorney, and so they extorted this MD and lawyer and had them do funny paperwork. This is behind their back. They don't know anything about it. This individual has mental issues and they're unstable. So they had to go to court for all of this. And they diverted all this mail to their home, filled out all the reasonable paperwork. First it went to like a mental institution, then diverted it to their house. But it was supposed to go to this man's house. So it looked like it was coming from a place where this person might have been staying for a time. So what they did was they had to go to court. So they get an impersonator to go to court and act crazy. And then they had to get them thrown out of court. And they showed that this person, as crazy as they were acting, that were impersonating this man that had the mental issues, that they had to make this court case private. So they made the court case private through the judicial system, and the judge and the lawyer and representative, the female that was married to him, was there. They also had a priest who dealt with the coven, and he was well known in the city, so he was in on it in the family. So he was somebody that would show up too and back up the female and saying that this individual was terrible. And they would have several coven members that would show up as witnesses and say that they knew this man and that he was crazy, in fact. So they got a healthcare power of attorney on him and were able to siphon the inheritance that way, as if she was their caregiver. And she was a registered nurse, so it would make sense, right? But she was corrupted, of course. She was supposed to be the hit woman, and they were all in a coven. So they would do all these spells and things also for people that were of an authority that weren't in on the case. They started to gang stalk this man around his house and everywhere he went through 2 police officers that were in the family, one being the boyfriend and brother, but they had a couple. So they did all this. And then they had a CPS issue at their home because the boyfriend to the female that was taking care of this man, unbeknownst to him, and siphoning off this inheritance, he CPS case from messing with a child, stepson, and it was child abuse and stuff like that, bad stuff. So they had to go to court for that. So what they did is they blamed it on this man. This man was staying with them, and they had the child lie. And one of the brothers worked for the CPS department. So he pushed it straight through, but he was also having relations with this wife to this man, unbeknownst to him. But they started to get these STIs and STDs, and so they started spreading them all around. And this was like a coven of people that were very, very promiscuous, and they would do these things. They would all have relations with each other and with each other's wives and husbands and threesomes and all of that, orgies, And so they were able to get this healthcare power of attorney, and then they had all these STIs, STDs going through all these people. And some of them knew about it. Some of them did not know that they were doing this to others. The sociopath is pretty much where it started. So they then had a CPS issue where they wanted to meet with this man that they were taking care of that had the mental issues, but that was going to cause a problem. So what they did was they went to another country and took one of the coven members or somebody they hired to impersonate the man who impersonated this individual at court. So they took him on a vacation, and they put a bunch of substances in him and had him wreck a car, and he passed away, but really, truly, it was from the substances that took him out. So then they had a false coroner, or a bribed extortion coroner, and this lawyer say that this person died and did false death paperwork on this individual. So then when they came back from this trip, they said that this individual had gotten high and they had passed due to a car accident outside the country. So that CPS case was taken care of. And then they were able to try to take the inheritance money out through the passing of the man, because this is now this wife. But this man is still at home doing fine. He's working all the time, and he's running his channel, trying to heal up. It's maybe a couple of years have gone by. So they sent many hitmen out, and it wasn't working. And they would all get diverted. Something would happen. They'd get scared or something, and they would never be able to perform the situation. So they went into this thing called this Akashic record, where it's a spiritual library, is what the world calls it. Some spiritual library where they can tap into, but they need to be on your vibration level. But because this individual had been having intercourse with this man, was able to get into this Akashic record because she was corded up to his vibration. And because she was corded up to his vibration, she was able to get into this Akashic record and find out that he was a starseed. And then they were in trouble, because now everything that they did, they would do all this death magic and they would do all this destiny swapping, but it didn't work. I mean, it would affect this man, but over time, it started to get to a point to where it just You know, when the enemy sends something out for evil, God turns it to good. Well, it was starting to flip like that. He was known as the one that was able to alchemize all of this negative energy into goodness and healing. So he started to rapidly increase his healing and his abilities. And then the cycle ran out. The contract was over. And because they weren't able to take this person out, they were now owed a life. Somebody was supposed to be sacrificed, so they started sacrificing people. Unbeknownst to these individuals, they were being taken out. People were getting sick, and karma was starting to hit them. They were getting weird sicknesses, and because these spells and this magic wasn't hitting this individual, because it wasn't, there was no legal rights, because this person had healed up to a level where it wasn't allowed anymore. The cycle had ended as well. And this person stayed away from all this toxicity. Hadn't talked to them in a couple of years. Well, they were all getting sick, and these sicknesses started to increase with quickness. Instead of like something that would take 20 years to take you out, it might take you 6 months or a year. All these weird things started to happen, almost like Final Destination, the movie. These people were getting unalived in motorcycle wrecks, car wrecks, people fighting amongst themselves. Then they started taking loans out with all these gangsters from this other family, and they didn't have the money to pay them back because now they were taking so much out of this inheritance that somebody flagged it that worked on inheritance cases. So it was stopped, and they had to start going to court again. Of course, this child started to tell the truth. And so this became a CPS issue for the actual boyfriend. But because now this man was unalived, he actually got married to this woman. And then they rooted the whole coven through all this intercourse they're doing. So anybody that would have intercourse with one of these three members would get rooted to this demon devil. And this demon devil would be able to connect them all to where they could not be apart. They were rooted all together. So they all had to like live together. But this inheritance case also came with a big house, a big home, and a farm, a couple other houses. And so they all lived in this huge house. They were kind of forced to because of the way they rooted themselves, but they were also very powerful in their spelling because they could all root together and do it together and do all this weird stuff, graveyard magic, orgy magic, and they would do candle magic, mirror magic, dead spells, and they kept doing those spells even though they were cycling out. They even went to other countries, like islands like Haiti, because one was Haitian, one was Liberian, one was like French or Russian. And so they would go do these incantations and spells, pay these people tens of thousands of dollars from this inheritance case to put spell work on this individual. It wouldn't work. A lot of times it would take out the practitioner, or the practitioner would look into, these individuals spiritually and say, this is not legal. I can't legally do this. They're not a bad individual, so I don't have rights. And they would force them to pay them a lot more money. Or when they would pay them, the practitioner wouldn't do the spell. They would just act like they were, because they knew they were going to get the blowback. So some of them would just take the money and say they did it, but they didn't because they were afraid to, because they know the repercussions. And some they would just put on them. So then they had the CPS issue, and they start to get fired from their positions. And this is starting to be shown, these houses and these homes and things. And you had somebody that woke up and was looking at this stuff because they had started to see that this person they were an individual that watched this person's channel, and they were a law official in the judicial system. So they were able to, after a while, they heard a few things on this person's channel, and they started to look into it because they knew this person wasn't crazy. They were sane, completely sane. They didn't have any mental health issues, and they were very calm. They didn't panic when they talked. And that was this person's saving grace. Because if this person would have panicked and was talking all crazy on their YouTube channel, then this individual wouldn't even looked into this case, because you would really look like you were crazy. And that's typically the case. Even if you're not crazy, that would typically how you would be looked. But this person had healed up so well, they knew it was in the Lord's hands and it was going to be taken care of. Actually, had gotten word spiritually that everything was taken care of. Just sit back and you're protected. There's nothing that they can do. In fact, if they send any more of this spelling out, eventually they'll take all of their abilities away. Just wait it out. They'll let them cycle a little bit for a few more months doing it, but it won't take you out. It might hurt a little, but it will elevate you. So they started to make these gang stalking channels where they would bully and pay people a bunch of money to hack the channel, because they had to get the channel off. And they used other organizations to help them, but it wasn't working. The channel was kind of protected as well. It was protected. And this channel couldn't be taken down. It did pay a lot of major injuries, and they were siphoning off funds and trying to copyright the information. They were trying to copycat this individual, and they wanted to be this individual. They were jealous of this individual. They were trying to copyright the materials, claiming it to be their own. They got jobs and became successful in that as well for about 15 minutes because this individual had started to really finish up his healing and drew all of his fuel back. And when he drew all of his fuel back, their businesses went to crap. People were seeing through their masks. They were in court trying to stand up this case, and it wasn't working. The judge and the lawyer ended up getting caught up in it and getting fired. The FBI male, the one that controlled the mail, the old grandfather, he got fired and put in prison. The mailman got fired and caught. The mail official got in trouble and fired and caught. The police officers got fired as well. Everybody got fired, and they're all starting to get questioned. They got a new judge in place, and this person that was listening to the channel that worked for the judicial system started to look into things privately because it just seemed like there was so much organized material that this man was putting out on his channel. They just wanted to look into it because they were real good at what they did. And they had dealt with psychopaths or antisocials. So they knew, and they had dealt with them in law and personally. So they knew that this type of stuff is could very well be true. They also had a lot of things to defame this person. They had websites, and they would defame the channel and talk bad about them like they were a witch or a warlock, but they weren't. And the whole coven thought they were evil. So why not do it to an evil individual? No big deal. But then they started to find out this person was a starseed. They were covered, they were protected, and they were actually a good person. Some of these coven members started to heal, started to listen to this man. And the channel lost a lot of its revenue, and it also lost a lot of its following. The traffic really slowed down, but it didn't get put out. They were trying to crush this man's spirit, and they had to keep him undercover because now he was deceased. They had taken PPP loans at him. They cashed in a life insurance policy on this individual because they were already passed away on paper. So one thing, they now have immunity because you can't do double jeopardy on somebody, right? But also, they started to all get caught up. The MD lost his job. They all start passing away. And then this grandfather started to realize, as he healed, while he was sick and passing away, that his family was a bunch of crooks. So he changed his will, and he put his whole will, his whole family's will, into this man's, under this man that was being abused. Partly because he didn't want to have what he believed karma would be in his next life, but also he was kind of healing and seeing things for what they really were. So he rewrote the will and put it all in this person's name as another one of his sons, and might have been his son, but this is kind of what happened. Then they got caught up with a RICO Act. They weren't paying taxes and things, and they were bullying people, and all these cases started coming up. This man on his channel was getting spiritual information through the Holy Ghost and was able to out them for a few things as he caught on and found out he did have a case in the judicial system, but because it was private, they weren't able to allow him in. But this law official said, let me see if this guy's crazy. And they started looking into things, and one right after another, they found that he was right. And so what happened is he won the case, sued the whole city, every department, and they almost went bankrupt. Then the gangbangers were all fighting each other, the coven fighting them. They're all dying from all these weird sicknesses, from all this black magic, the STDs, STIs hitting them, and they're getting popped off like flies. Some of them would just be walking on the street and have a heart attack and die because they did heart attack spells or whatever. And any infection that they got, they would have the ones that would eat your flesh-eating diseases in their growing, and gangrene and prostate cancer and all kind of metastatic cancers and things. And they would be moving like 20 years time. They would move in 3 months because the blowback from the magic was occurring. It was speeding up the course of these infections and diseases. So they're all getting taken out left and right. And all this man had to do at this point was just sit back. He won all the cases. They all kicked the bucket, but it also sent a ripple effect. And within the matter of like 12 days, 3 huge covens fell that were out of state, that were connected. And two on the East Coast and one on the West Coast, which are long term. And then there was one in Texas that was going down as well. And they're all evil. They span many states: Virginia, California, New York, Pennsylvania, Baltimore, Maryland, and North Carolina, Florida. All these different states, Iowa, Michigan. They were all getting knocked down, taken down. They caught the traffickers, and the children were saved. This man started a project that would help individuals, and he had to be put into witness protection. And he got with that official later, and they started a company together. It was a conglomerate that was able to combat evil and raise the vibration of the world system because of this information this man was given, and he was able to get with this woman who was maybe once into different things, and they knew different things than he did. So two different sides of the track, and they were able to put them together and become light workers and start this information that would help others to succeed, and later bring this material that was able to raise the vibration, equalize the balance in this world. So thank you for watching. I'm still working on it, but this is kind of what I've put together. I might do something with it. Tell me what you think in the comments. Love y'all. Till next time. So, peace be out.